Tonight, we journey back 2,500 years to the misty mountains and warring kingdoms of ancient China. There, a brilliant military strategist named Sun Tzu wrote a text that would echo through millennia. His work, known as The Art of War, transcends its origins on the battlefield. It speaks to anyone facing conflict, competition, or the simple challenge of navigating life's complexities. This is not merely a story of war. It is a story of wisdom, strategy, and the eternal human struggle to understand ourselves and those around us. The legend begins in the state of Qi, where a young boy named Sun Tzu was born into a family of military scholars. From his earliest days, he breathed the air of strategy. His father and uncles spoke of troop movements over dinner. His grandfather traced battle formations in the sand while teaching him to read. But young Sun Tzu was different from his ancestors. Where they saw only soldiers and swords, he saw patterns. Where they counted casualties, he calculated possibilities. He watched ants marching to their colonies and saw supply lines. He observed birds fleeing from predators and understood the nature of retreat. His childhood was spent in a world of constant warfare. The Zhou dynasty had fragmented into competing kingdoms, each seeking dominance over the others. Armies clashed regularly across the fertile plains. Cities rose and fell with the fortunes of war. Young Sun Tzu absorbed the stories of these conflicts, but he listened differently than other children. While they cheered tales of heroic charges and brave last stands, he asked questions that made adults uncomfortable. Why did that army lose when it had more soldiers? What mistakes did the defeated general make? As Sun Tzu grew into adolescence, the kingdom of Qi fell into political turmoil. The noble families quarreled endlessly, their petty disputes weakening the state from within. Sun Tzu watched with growing dismay as talented generals were dismissed for political reasons, as wise advisors were silenced by jealous rivals. He realized that the greatest battles were not fought on open fields but in the corridors of power, in the minds of men. This understanding would shape everything he would later write. Victory, he began to comprehend, was achieved long before the first arrow flew. The young strategist spent years studying the histories of ancient campaigns. He read accounts of legendary commanders from centuries past, analyzing their victories and defeats with methodical precision. He noticed that the most celebrated generals often won through courage and valor, charging boldly into enemy lines. But the greatest commanders, those who built lasting empires, won through calculation and cunning. They understood their enemies intimately. They created situations where victory was inevitable before battle even commenced. This distinction fascinated him deeply. He began to write down his observations, organizing them into categories and principles. He noticed that certain patterns repeated across different eras and different conflicts. The overconfident general who underestimated his opponent, the army that advanced too far from its supply lines, the kingdom that exhausted itself in prolonged warfare. These mistakes appeared again and again throughout history. Sun Tzu realized that by understanding these patterns, a commander could avoid repeating them and exploit them in enemies. Seeking to escape the chaos of Qi, the young strategist traveled south to the kingdom of Wu. He carried with him nothing but his observations, his theories, and a burning desire to test them against reality. The journey was long and dangerous. Bandits roamed the roads between kingdoms, and travelers disappeared without trace. But Sun Tzu moved like water, adapting to every obstacle. When the path was blocked, he found another way. When danger approached, he became invisible. He was already practicing what he would later teach. During his travels, Sun Tzu encountered a village besieged by bandits. The villagers had tried fighting back, but their courage only brought more casualties. They had tried paying tribute, but the bandits' demands only increased. Sun Tzu observed the situation for several days before approaching the village elder. He asked questions about the bandits' patterns, their numbers, their leaders, their relationships with surrounding groups. Then he proposed a plan that seemed impossibly simple yet brilliant in its understanding of human nature. Instead of fighting or paying, the village would create the illusion of a deadly plague. They would burn foul-smelling herbs, paint fake sores on visible skin, and spread rumors through traveling merchants that a terrible sickness had descended. Within weeks, the bandits avoided the village entirely, fearing infection. Sun Tzu had won without fighting, demonstrating a principle that would become central to his philosophy. The greatest victory comes not from strength, but from making the enemy choose not to engage. The kingdom of Wu was ruled by King Helu, an ambitious monarch who dreamed of expanding his domain. When Sun Wu arrived at the court, he was just another scholar seeking patronage. Dozens came each month with grand theories and lofty promises. Most were dismissed within days. But Sun Wu carried something different. He had written his observations on bamboo strips, organizing them into 13 chapters. This text would become known as the Art of War. He presented it to the king with simple confidence. King Helu read through the night, his oil lamp burning low as dawn approached. He had never encountered anything like this. Other strategists spoke of courage and honor, of glorious charges and heroic last stands. This text spoke of deception and preparation, of winning without fighting, of knowing when not to act. It challenged everything the king thought he knew about warfare. By morning, he had summoned Sun Wu to his chambers, demanding to know if these principles could truly be applied in the real world. Sun Wu answered with characteristic directness. Theories were meaningless, he said, unless they could be demonstrated. He proposed an unusual test. Give him the most undisciplined group imaginable, and he would transform them into a functioning military unit. The king, amused and curious, offered his palace concubines. 180 women who had never held weapons, who giggled at the thought of marching in formation. Surely this would expose the scholar as a fraud and end his pretensions. But Sun Wu accepted without hesitation. He divided the concubines into 2 companies and appointed the king's 2 favorite consorts as their commanders. He explained the signals clearly. When he beat the drum once, they should face forward. Twice, they should turn left. 3 times, turn right. The concubines listened, then burst into laughter when he raised his drumstick. They found the entire situation absurd. A scholar playing general with palace women seemed like entertainment, not training. Sun Wu did not react with anger. He simply repeated his instructions, ensuring everyone understood. Then he beat the drum. Again, the women dissolved into giggles, pointing at each other and making no attempt to follow commands. The king watched from his pavilion, chuckling at the spectacle. But Sun Wu's expression remained unchanged. He called for the executioner. A stunned silence fell over the courtyard as the gravity of his words became clear. The 2 company commanders, the king's beloved consorts, were to be beheaded for failing to maintain discipline. King Helu leaped from his seat, shouting for Sun Wu to stop. These were his favorites. Surely the scholar would not actually harm them over such a trivial exercise. Sun Wu replied calmly that once a general had accepted command, there were certain orders from the sovereign he need not obey. The drums had been clear, the commands had been understood, failure to obey was punishable by death. The executions proceeded despite the king's protests. The remaining concubines fell silent, their faces pale with shock. When Sun Wu beat the drum again, they moved as one, pivoting and marching with military precision. Not a single woman made a mistake. Not a whisper of laughter escaped their lips. Sun Wu reported to the horrified king that his troops were now ready for inspection. They would go through water and fire at his command without hesitation. King Helu was devastated by the loss of his consorts, but he could not deny what he had witnessed. Sun Wu had demonstrated something profound. Discipline was not cruelty for its own sake. It was the foundation upon which all victory was built. Without it, the finest strategies were worthless. Without it, the most powerful armies would crumble at the first sign of adversity. The king appointed Sun Wu as his general, setting in motion a military campaign that would reshape the map of ancient China. The first campaign tested Sun Wu's principles against a numerically superior force. The kingdom of Chu had assembled an army 3 times larger than Wu could field. Traditional wisdom suggested seeking peace or at least delay until conditions improved, but Sun Wu saw opportunity where others saw only danger. He studied the enemy commander, learning that the man was proud, impetuous, and easily angered. He devised a strategy to exploit these weaknesses systematically. Sun Wu sent small raiding parties to harass the Chu forces, always retreating before serious engagement. He spread rumors that Wu's army was weak and frightened. He allowed captured soldiers to escape, ensuring they would report Wu's apparent disarray. The Chu commander grew contemptuous, pressing forward without adequate reconnaissance. When his army entered a narrow valley that Sun Wu had prepared, the trap was sprung. The superior force was annihilated in a devastating ambush. Under Sun Wu's command, the armies of Wu achieved what many had thought impossible. They defeated the great kingdom of Chu, capturing its capital in a lightning campaign that stunned the ancient world. They broke armies 3 times their size, not through superior numbers or equipment, but through superior strategy. Sun Wu had transformed his 13 chapters from theory into devastating reality. His name became legend, and over time legend transformed him into Sun Tzu, meaning Master Sun. But what exactly did those 13 chapters contain? What wisdom allowed a kingdom of modest resources to challenge the greatest powers of its age? The answer lies not in any single principle, but in a comprehensive understanding of conflict itself. Sun Tzu saw warfare as an extension of all human competition. The same principles that guided armies could guide merchants, politicians, and anyone navigating life's inevitable struggles. His genius was making the complex seem simple and accessible. The first and most fundamental principle was the importance of calculation. Before any campaign, before any conflict, you must assess everything. Know your own strengths and weaknesses with brutal honesty. Know your opponent's capabilities and vulnerabilities with equal clarity. Understand the terrain, the weather, the political situation, the morale of both sides. Sun Tzu taught that wars are won in the planning room, not on the battlefield. The general who calculates more will win. Sun Tzu outlined 5 fundamental factors that determine the outcome of any conflict. First is the way, the moral alignment between leaders and followers that inspires wholehearted commitment. Second is heaven, meaning the natural conditions of time and season. Third is earth, the geography and terrain of engagement. Fourth is the commander, the qualities of leadership that guide decisions. Fifth is method, the organizational and logistical systems that enable action. Understanding these factors allows accurate prediction of outcomes. This calculation extended to knowing when not to fight at all. Sun Tzu shocked his contemporaries by declaring that the supreme art of war was to subdue the enemy without fighting. Every battle, even a victorious one, consumed resources and created casualties. The truly skilled strategist found ways to achieve objectives without drawing swords. Diplomacy, economic pressure, psychological manipulation, these were tools as valuable as any weapon. Sometimes the threat of force accomplished more than its application. Sun Tzu ranked the approaches to victory in a clear hierarchy. Highest was attacking the enemy's strategy, disrupting their plans before they could act. Next was attacking their alliances, isolating them from potential support. Third was attacking their army, the conventional understanding of warfare. Lowest was attacking their cities, the most costly and destructive approach. This hierarchy revealed that Sun Tzu valued efficiency over glory, results over spectacle. He was a pragmatist above all else. Deception formed the heart of Sun Tzu's tactical teachings. All warfare, he wrote, is based on deception. When capable, appear incapable. When active, appear inactive. When near, make the enemy believe you are far. When far, make them think you are near. This was not seen as dishonorable. To Sun Tzu, preserving the lives of your soldiers through clever stratagem was far more virtuous than sacrificing them in straightforward combat. The general who could not deceive was a general who would get his men killed. He elaborated on specific methods of deception with remarkable precision. Offer the enemy bait to lure him forward. Feign disorder to encourage his attack. If he is secure at all points, prepare for him. If he is in superior strength, evade him. If your opponent is of choleric temper, irritate him. Pretend to be weak, that he may grow arrogant. These practical instructions transformed abstract philosophy into actionable technique that commanders could implement immediately. Speed and timing received equal emphasis in the 13 chapters. Sun Tzu compared the skilled warrior to a falcon that strikes and crushes its prey. The strike must come at precisely the right moment, too fast for the enemy to react. He taught that in war, the way is to avoid what is strong and strike what is weak. A prolonged campaign drained resources and morale. The best victories came swift and sudden, before the enemy even understood they were under attack. The analogy of water pervaded Sun Tzu's teachings on adaptation and timing. Military tactics are like water, he observed. For water, in its natural course, runs away from high places and hastens downward. So in war, avoid what is strong and strike at what is weak. Water shapes its course according to the ground over which it flows. The soldier works out his victory in relation to the foe whom he is facing. This imagery captured the essential fluidity required for success. The concept of flexibility pervaded all of Sun Tzu's teachings. Just as water has no constant shape, warfare has no constant conditions. The general who clung to rigid plans was doomed to failure. Every situation demanded fresh assessment and creative response. Victory went to those who could adapt quickly and decisively. The skilled commander was like a mirror, reflecting and responding to whatever appeared before him. Sun Tzu devoted considerable attention to understanding and exploiting terrain. He classified ground into various types, each requiring different tactics. There was dispersive ground, where fighting should be avoided. There was facile ground, where troops should not halt. There was contentious ground, which neither side should attack. Understanding where you fought was as important as how you fought. The skilled general chose his battlefields as carefully as his strategies. He detailed 9 varieties of ground with specific instructions for each. On dispersive ground, fight not. On facile ground, halt not. On contentious ground, attack not. On open ground, do not try to block the enemy. On ground of intersecting highways, join hands with your allies. On serious ground, gather plunder. On difficult ground, keep steadily on the march. On hemmed-in ground, resort to stratagem. On desperate ground, fight with all your strength. Intelligence gathering received perhaps the most practical emphasis in Sun Tzu's work. Know the enemy and know yourself, he declared, and in 100 battles you will never be in peril. This knowledge could not come from divine revelation or scholarly speculation. It came from spies, from scouts, from careful observation. Sun Tzu detailed different types of intelligence agents and how to employ them. He considered this information so valuable that he placed the chapter on spies at the conclusion of his work. He identified 5 types of spies essential for effective intelligence. Local spies were inhabitants of enemy territory. Inside spies were enemy officials turned to your service. Reverse spies were enemy agents converted to work for you. Dead spies were those who spread false information, knowing they would likely be killed when discovered. Living spies returned with direct intelligence. The skilled commander employed all 5 types in a coordinated network. The treatment of one's own forces reflected Sun Tzu's sophisticated understanding of human nature. He taught that soldiers must be treated with humanity, but controlled with iron discipline, the same lesson he had demonstrated so dramatically with the palace concubines. A general should regard his troops as his own children, and they will follow him into the deepest valleys. But this affection must be balanced with authority, or the army would become like spoiled children, useless for any practical purpose. Leadership itself received profound attention in the 13 chapters. Sun Tzu described the ideal general as possessing 5 essential qualities: wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, and strictness. The absence of anyone could prove fatal. A general who was wise but not courageous would hesitate at crucial moments. One who was brave but not wise would rush into traps. The balance of these qualities created the centered leadership that could guide men through chaos. He also warned of 5 dangerous faults that could afflict a commander. If reckless, he could be killed. If cowardly, he could be captured. If quick-tempered, he could be provoked by insults. If too sensitive to shame, he could be manipulated through honor. If too compassionate toward his men, he could be worn out by constant worry. Understanding these vulnerabilities allowed both self-improvement and the exploitation of enemy weaknesses. Perhaps most revolutionary was Sun Tzu's emphasis on psychological warfare. He understood that battles were won in minds before they were won on fields. He taught methods of undermining enemy morale, of sowing discord among opposing forces, of creating doubt in enemy commanders. A city whose people believed defeat was inevitable would surrender without siege. An army whose soldiers questioned their general would break at the first clash. The unseen war often decided the visible one. Economic considerations wove throughout Sun Tzu's strategic framework. War consumed wealth at terrifying rates. A prolonged campaign could bankrupt even the richest kingdom. Therefore, Sun Tzu urged that objectives be achieved as quickly and efficiently as possible. When you surround an army, leave an outlet free. If you do not, desperate soldiers would fight to the death, making victory far more costly. Give the enemy a path to retreat, and many would take it rather than die. The concept of strategic advantage, which Sun Tzu called shi, represented one of his most subtle contributions. It referred to the potential energy of a position, like a boulder perched at the top of a hill. The skilled general created situations where even small forces could achieve great effects because they acted at the right moment from the right position. Victory then came not from overwhelming strength, but from accumulated advantage released at the perfect moment. Sun Tzu illustrated this concept through vivid imagery. When torrential water tosses boulders, it is because of its momentum. When the strike of a hawk breaks the body of its prey, it is because of timing. Thus the momentum of one skilled in war is overwhelming, and his attack precisely timed. His potential is like a fully drawn crossbow, his timing like the release of the trigger. This imagery captured the explosive power of strategic positioning. These principles spread far beyond China over the centuries. Japanese samurai studied Sun Tzu's text for centuries, finding in it guidance that complemented their own warrior traditions. The great unifiers of Japan, Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu, all studied the art of war. Their campaigns reflected Sun Tzu's emphasis on deception, speed, and the psychological dimensions of conflict. When Western merchants and missionaries reached Asia, they encountered a sophistication of military thought that challenged their assumptions. Translations appeared in French, then other European languages. Napoleon reportedly carried a copy during his campaigns across Europe. Military academies began incorporating Sun Tzu's teachings alongside Western strategic traditions. The wisdom of ancient China touched minds across oceans and centuries. In the 20th century, Sun Tzu's influence expanded dramatically into modern warfare. Mao Zedong applied the principles to revolutionary warfare, particularly the emphasis on knowing when to fight and when to retreat. Ho Chi Minh studied the text extensively, finding in it strategies that a smaller force could use against a larger one. American military planners, confronting these opponents, began their own serious study of the ancient Chinese master. Business executives discovered the art of war in the 1980s and transformed it into corporate gospel. The parallels seemed obvious to competitive minds. Competitive markets resembled battlefields. Rival companies played the role of enemy forces. Market share was territory to be captured and defended. Sun Tzu's principles of intelligence gathering, deception, and striking at weaknesses translated readily into business strategy. In modern times, Sun Tzu's influence has extended into realms he could never have imagined. Coaches apply his principles to athletic competition and team building. Negotiators use his insights to navigate complex deals and difficult personalities. Therapists sometimes recommend his work to clients facing personal conflicts. Political campaigns study his strategies for competitive advantage. The universality of his observations about competition, preparation, and human nature ensures his relevance continues. Consider how Sun Tzu's principle of deception applies today. In an age of information warfare and sophisticated propaganda, his insights feel almost prophetic. Nations and organizations compete to shape perceptions, to make others see what they wish them to see. Social media becomes a battlefield where truth and falsehood clash constantly. The ancient master's observation that all warfare is based on deception grows more relevant, not less. Cyber warfare exemplifies Sun Tzu's principles in digital form. The emphasis on attacking the enemy's strategy translates into disrupting command and control systems. The value of intelligence gathering manifests in massive surveillance programs. The preference for winning without fighting appears in economic sanctions and infrastructure attacks that avoid direct military confrontation. Ancient wisdom finds new application in silicon and code. His lessons about leadership translate readily beyond military contexts. The 5 qualities of the ideal general, wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, and strictness, describe effective leadership in any organization. The balance between caring for those you lead and maintaining necessary discipline applies to corporations, sports teams, community organizations, and families. Sun Tzu spoke to generals, but he described universal principles of human leadership. The emphasis on adaptability becomes crucial in our rapidly changing world. Sun Tzu observed that the 5 elements are not equally predominant. The 4 seasons make way for each other in turn. Similarly, in warfare and in life, conditions constantly shift. Strategies that worked yesterday may fail tomorrow. Only those who remain flexible, who read changing situations accurately and respond appropriately, will thrive in any era. Perhaps most profound is Sun Tzu's understanding that victory lies not merely in defeating opponents, but in achieving objectives with minimal cost. The goal is never destruction for its own sake. The goal is accomplishing what you set out to accomplish while preserving your resources and relationships. This might mean compromising, finding solutions that allow all parties to feel they have gained something. Even in competition, total war is rarely wise. Let us consider a modern application of these ancient principles. Imagine an entrepreneur launching a new business in a competitive market. Sun Tzu would advise her first to calculate thoroughly, study the market landscape with rigorous attention, know your own resources and capabilities, understand competitor strengths and weaknesses, map the terrain, the regulatory environment, customer preferences, distribution channels. Before launching, know exactly what you are facing. She should seek to win without fighting where possible. Perhaps there are underserved market segments where competition is light. Perhaps partnerships could be formed that benefit all parties. Perhaps innovation could create entirely new markets rather than battling for share in existing ones. Direct confrontation with established players, unless necessary, wastes resources that could build the business. Find the path of least resistance to success. Speed and timing would guide her product launches and marketing campaigns. Strike when the market is ready, when competitors are distracted, when your preparation is complete. Move too early, and you exhaust resources before achieving traction. Move too late, and opportunities pass to others. The falcon's strike must come at precisely the right moment. In business, as in war, timing often determines outcomes more than effort alone. Flexibility would pervade her strategic planning throughout the venture. No business plan survives first contact with the market unchanged. Customer feedback reveals unexpected needs and opportunities. Competitors respond in unforeseen ways. Economic conditions shift without warning. Technology evolves rapidly. The entrepreneur who clings to rigid plans courts disaster. Like water taking the shape of its container, the successful business adapts continuously. These principles apply equally whether the challenge is military, commercial, athletic, or personal. A student facing examinations would benefit from Sun Tzu's emphasis on preparation and knowing the terrain of the test. An athlete competing in tournament would recognize the importance of psychological advantage and strategic positioning. A family navigating conflict would find wisdom in seeking resolution without costly confrontation that damages relationships. This universality explains Sun Tzu's enduring appeal across cultures and centuries. He did not merely write about war. He wrote about the dynamics of competition and the psychology of adversity. He explored how humans behave under pressure, how groups can be motivated and directed, how advantages can be created and exploited. These are eternal concerns, relevant whenever people face challenges and opposition in any form. Yet we must be careful not to misapply Sun Tzu's wisdom without reflection. His principles emerged from a specific context, the brutal interstate competition of ancient China's warring states period. Violence was constant. Kingdoms rose and fell with regularity. Survival required ruthless pragmatism. Some of his teachings, taken literally and applied without moral compass, could justify terrible actions that we would rightly condemn. The execution of King Helu's consorts illustrates this danger clearly. Sun Tzu proved his point about discipline, but at what cost? Modern readers rightly recoil from such severity. We must engage these texts critically, extracting wisdom while recognizing that ancient values differed from our own. Sun Tzu himself might have responded that sentiment is a luxury that the defeated cannot afford. We need not accept that argument entirely. Perhaps the deepest lesson of Sun Tzu is the importance of perspective itself. He stepped back from immediate conflict to see larger patterns. He asked not just how to win this battle, but what winning truly meant, and whether fighting was even necessary. This capacity for strategic detachment, for seeing situations clearly rather than reacting emotionally, may be his greatest gift to posterity. Wisdom begins with accurate perception of reality. As we conclude our journey through the art of war, let us remember that Sun Tzu wrote not to celebrate conflict, but to minimize its costs. His ideal was victory without bloodshed, achieved through superior preparation and positioning. He would take no pleasure in destruction for its own sake. The truly skilled strategist, in his view, resolved situations before they escalated to violence. Prevention was superior to cure in all things. This vision of strategic wisdom speaks to our own troubled times with remarkable clarity. We face conflicts at every level, between nations, between communities, between individuals. The temptation to escalate, to meet force with force, to seek total victory over opponents, remains powerful. Sun Tzu offers an alternative path. Calculate carefully. Seek advantage through position rather than confrontation. Win by making fighting unnecessary. Preserve resources. Look for solutions that allow all parties to save face. The legacy of Sun Tzu continues to unfold with each new reader who encounters his words. Perhaps you will find in his 13 chapters insights relevant to challenges you face today. Perhaps his emphasis on preparation will inspire more thorough planning in your endeavors. Perhaps his teachings about flexibility will encourage adaptation when circumstances change. Perhaps his psychological insights will help you understand adversaries and allies alike. 25 centuries have passed since a brilliant strategist in ancient China observed the patterns of conflict and set down his observations on bamboo strips. Kingdoms have risen and fallen beyond counting. Technologies have transformed beyond recognition. The nature of war itself has evolved from chariot charges to cyber attacks. Yet through all this change, Sun Tzu's fundamental insights endure because they address aspects of human nature that do not change. We compete. We face obstacles. We seek to achieve goals against opposition. These are constants of the human condition across all cultures and eras. Sun Tzu offered not magic formulas, but systematic ways of thinking about these challenges. His wisdom lies less in specific prescriptions than in the disciplined approach to analysis and planning that pervades his work. Learn to see clearly, prepare thoroughly, act decisively, adapt continuously. These principles transcend any particular domain. And so we leave the mountains and courts of ancient China, carrying with us the accumulated wisdom of Master Sun. His voice speaks across the millennia, offering guidance to anyone willing to listen. Whether you face battles in boardrooms or personal struggles, his observations illuminate the path forward. The art of war, properly understood, is the art of navigating life's inevitable conflicts with wisdom, skill, and minimal destruction. Thank you for joining us on this journey through ancient wisdom. May the teachings of Sun Tzu guide you not toward conflict, but toward its resolution, not toward victory at any cost, but toward outcomes that preserve what matters most. In understanding war, we may find peace. In mastering strategy, we may achieve our goals without strife. That, perhaps, would be the victory Sun Tzu himself would most appreciate, the supreme achievement of winning without fighting. The morning mist rises from the valleys where ancient armies once marched, yet Sun Tzu's words remain as sharp as the swords his soldiers carried. Let us delve deeper into the practical applications of his wisdom, for understanding alone is not enough. Knowledge must be applied to transform lives and achieve the victories we seek in our own modern battles. Consider the principle of knowing your enemy and knowing yourself. In practical terms, this means honest self-assessment before any significant undertaking. What are your true capabilities? Not what you wish they were, not what others believe them to be, but what they actually are. This requires the courage to face uncomfortable truths. Many failures begin with self-deception, with the refusal to acknowledge weakness or limitation. Sun Tzu would advise the job seeker to study the company thoroughly before the interview. Learn its culture, its challenges, its competitors, its recent decisions. Understand what the hiring manager truly needs, not just what the job posting says. Then assess your own skills honestly. Where do you genuinely excel? Where do you need development? The candidate who enters the interview with this dual knowledge holds tremendous advantage over those who wing it. The same principle applies to relationships of all kinds. Understanding another person deeply, their motivations, fears, desires, and patterns of behavior, enables effective communication and conflict resolution. Understanding yourself equally well, your triggers, biases, and tendencies, prevents reactive behavior that damages relationships. Sun Tzu understood that most battles are won or lost before the confrontation begins. Let us explore the concept of strategic patience, a virtue Sun Tzu valued highly. In our age of instant gratification, patience seems almost countercultural. We want results immediately. We measure success in quarterly reports and daily metrics. Yet Sun Tzu taught that rushing into action without adequate preparation courts disaster. The skilled strategist waits for the right moment, building strength while appearing inactive. This patience should not be confused with passivity. While waiting, the strategist prepares relentlessly. Sun Tzu's armies drilled constantly, studied terrain exhaustively, gathered intelligence continuously. The waiting was filled with purposeful activity. When the moment for action arrived, they were ready to strike with devastating effectiveness. Patience without preparation is mere procrastination. In modern contexts, strategic patience might mean resisting the urge to respond immediately to every provocation. The quick reply often escalates conflict unnecessarily. The measured response, delivered at the right moment with careful thought, often achieves better outcomes. Sun Tzu would recognize the wisdom in counting to 10 before reacting, in sleeping on important decisions, in letting emotions settle before taking action. The relationship between Sun Tzu's teachings and emotional intelligence deserves exploration. Though he lived millennia before psychologists coined that term, Sun Tzu understood its principles intuitively. Managing your own emotions while reading those of others accurately was essential for his ideal commander. The quick-tempered general who could be provoked into rash action was a danger to his own army. Modern research confirms what Sun Tzu observed empirically. Leaders with high emotional intelligence achieve better outcomes across virtually every measurable dimension. They build stronger teams, navigate conflicts more effectively, and maintain composure under pressure. The ancient strategist's emphasis on self-mastery as the foundation of all other mastery aligns perfectly with contemporary understanding. Sun Tzu also understood the power of incentives and motivation. He taught that soldiers fight best when they have something to gain and something to protect. An army defending its homeland fights with different intensity than mercenaries fighting for pay alone. The wise commander ensured his troops understood what they were fighting for and believed in the cause. Motivation multiplied capability far beyond mere numbers. This insight translates directly to organizational leadership today. Employees who understand the company's mission and see how their work contributes to it perform at higher levels. Teams with shared purpose outperform groups of talented individuals lacking common cause. Sun Tzu would recognize immediately the importance of communicating vision, of connecting individual effort to collective purpose, of building cultures where people want to give their best. The 13th chapter of The Art of War, dealing with spies and intelligence, deserves special attention in our information age. Sun Tzu considered intelligence the foundation of all successful strategy. Without accurate information about the enemy and the terrain, even the most brilliant plans would fail. He devoted enormous resources to gathering intelligence and protecting his own information from enemy spies. Today we swim in information, yet wisdom remains scarce. The challenge has shifted from gathering data to filtering signal from noise. Sun Tzu would advise careful attention to source quality. Not all information is equally reliable. Verify important claims through multiple independent sources. Be especially skeptical of information that confirms what you already believe, for confirmation bias blinds us to inconvenient truths. The concept of winning without fighting takes on new dimensions in the digital age. Cyber capabilities allow nations to achieve strategic objectives without firing a single shot. Economic sanctions impose costs without military casualties. Information operations shape perceptions and influence decisions across borders. Sun Tzu would recognize these as evolutions of principles he articulated millennia ago. Yet he would also warn against over-reliance on indirect methods. Sometimes direct action becomes necessary. The strategist who can only operate through deception and manipulation lacks crucial capability. The full spectrum of options must remain available, knowing when to fight and when to refrain, when to be direct and when to be indirect. This judgment separates the master strategist from the mere tactician. Sun Tzu's emphasis on understanding terrain extends beyond physical geography. In business, terrain includes market conditions, regulatory environment, competitive landscape, and technological trends. In personal life, terrain encompasses social networks, organizational cultures, and relationship dynamics. Reading terrain accurately enables positioning for success. The strategist surveys the terrain before committing resources. Where are the heights that offer advantage? Where are the valleys that trap the unwary? What paths offer swift advance, and which lead to ambush? These questions apply whether planning a military campaign, launching a product, or navigating a career change. Terrain shapes options and influences outcomes. Sun Tzu taught that the skilled commander puts his army into positions from which there is no retreat, thereby forcing them to fight with absolute commitment. This principle of burning bridges has modern applications. Sometimes commitment devices increase effectiveness. The entrepreneur who quits the day job removes the safety net but gains total focus. The student who announces ambitious goals publicly gains motivation from social accountability. However, this principle requires careful application. Burning bridges recklessly creates unnecessary risk. Sun Tzu advocated calculated commitments that increase focus without foolhardy exposure. The difference lies in preparation. When you have prepared thoroughly and chosen your ground wisely, eliminating retreat options can sharpen execution. When you have not, it simply guarantees disaster. The interplay between offense and defense received careful attention in Sun Tzu's teachings. He noted that defense is for times of insufficiency while attack is for times of surplus. When weak, defend. When strong, attack. But strength and weakness are relative and contextual. The skilled strategist creates situations where strength can be concentrated at decisive points, achieving local superiority even when globally outnumbered. This principle of concentration remains crucial in modern strategy. Startups cannot compete with established giants across all fronts. They succeed by concentrating resources in narrow niches where they can achieve dominance. Only after establishing strong positions do they expand. The same logic applies to personal development. Master one skill before attempting to become generally competent. Concentrated effort produces results that scattered attention never achieves. Sun Tzu would have much to say about the modern addiction to multitasking. He valued focus intensely. His armies concentrated force at single points rather than dispersing effort across wide fronts. Research consistently shows that human minds work similarly. We accomplish more by giving full attention to one task than by dividing attention among many. The illusion of multitasking efficiency masks the reality of reduced performance. The principle of adaptation must be applied to Sun Tzu's own teachings. He wrote for a specific context that differs dramatically from our own. Blindly applying ancient military principles to modern business or personal challenges invites error. The wisdom lies not in the specific prescriptions, but in the underlying patterns of thought. Learn the principles, then adapt them creatively to your own circumstances. Some critics argue that Sun Tzu's emphasis on deception and manipulation promotes unethical behavior. This critique deserves serious consideration. Certainly the principles can be misused. Manipulative individuals may find in the art of war justification for their behavior. But this misses Sun Tzu's deeper point. Deception was not an end in itself, but a means to minimize bloodshed and achieve objectives efficiently. In most modern contexts, reputation and relationships matter too much for sustained deception. The business leader who gains short-term advantage through manipulation often pays long-term costs in trust and cooperation. Sun Tzu himself noted that the best victories leave enemies willing to cooperate rather than burning with resentment. Sustainable success requires consideration of others' interests alongside your own. Perhaps the most important lesson from Sun Tzu concerns the nature of victory itself. He defined victory not as destruction of the enemy, but as achievement of objectives with minimal cost. This distinction matters enormously. Many who win battles lose wars. Many who defeat opponents destroy relationships that could have benefited both parties. True victory preserves what matters while achieving necessary goals. In personal conflicts, this might mean resolving disagreements in ways that maintain friendships. In business competition, it might mean winning market share without triggering destructive price wars. In international relations, it might mean achieving security without creating permanent enemies. Sun Tzu's vision of victory was sophisticated, long-term, and ultimately humane despite its origins in warfare. The ancient strategist also understood the role of momentum in human affairs. Once armies began advancing victoriously, confidence built upon itself. Soldiers fought harder when they expected to win. Enemies lost heart when defeat seemed inevitable. This psychological momentum often proved as decisive as physical force. Creating and riding momentum became an essential strategic skill. The same dynamic operates in careers, businesses, and personal endeavors. Early wins build confidence that enables further wins. Momentum creates opportunities as others want to associate with success. The skilled strategist cultivates momentum deliberately, seeking early victories that build psychological advantage. Conversely, preventing opponents from building momentum and disrupting it when it forms became key defensive tactics. Sun Tzu's influence on strategic thought remains profound after 25 centuries because he addressed fundamental aspects of competition and conflict. Human nature has not changed. We still seek advantage, we still face opponents, we still must navigate complex situations with incomplete information. The specific technologies and contexts evolve constantly, but the underlying dynamics remain remarkably stable. Reading The Art of War today, we encounter a mind of extraordinary clarity and insight. Sun Tzu saw through the chaos of warfare to underlying patterns. He systematized knowledge that others possessed only intuitively. He created a framework for thinking about strategy that remained useful across millennia of change. His achievement deserves recognition as one of humanity's great intellectual contributions. But ultimately, reading is not enough. Sun Tzu valued action over theory. He proved his principles through devastating application, not scholarly debate. The true test of his teachings lies in their application to your own challenges. What battles do you face? What terrain must you navigate? What enemies oppose you, and what allies might you cultivate? Begin with honest self-assessment, that most difficult and most essential task. Know your strengths without arrogance. Know your weaknesses without despair. Understand your resources, your constraints, your true objectives. This self-knowledge forms the foundation upon which all strategy must rest. Without it, the most clever plans collapse when confronted with reality. Then study your circumstances with equal rigor. Who opposes you and why? What do they want and what do they fear? Where are they strong and where are they weak? What resources do they command, and how might those resources be neutralized or redirected? The answers to these questions illuminate paths forward that remain invisible to the unreflective. Finally, act with the decisiveness that Sun Tzu advocated. Analysis paralysis claims many who understand strategy intellectually, but cannot execute practically. At some point, preparation must yield to action. The skilled strategist knows when that moment has arrived and moves without hesitation. Half-hearted execution wastes the advantages that careful preparation created. The world awaits your engagement with all its challenges and opportunities. Sun Tzu has given you a framework for approaching whatever obstacles you face. The ancient strategist's voice echoes across the centuries, offering guidance to those who will listen. But he cannot fight your battles for you. That task remains yours alone. Take these teachings and make them your own. Adapt them to your circumstances. Test them against your experience. Refine them through practice. In this way, the wisdom of Sun Tzu lives not as historical curiosity, but as practical guidance for navigating the challenges of existence. May your strategies prove sound, your timing prove perfect, and your victories prove lasting. Until we meet again on this journey through ancient wisdom, remember the supreme art of war. It is not to fight and conquer in all your battles. It is to subdue the enemy without fighting, win without warfare, achieve without aggression, succeed without suffering. That is the ultimate victory, and it remains available to all who study deeply and practice wisely. There is one more story worth telling as we conclude this journey through the wisdom of Sun Tzu. It concerns a young officer who came to study under the master in his final years. The officer had read The Art of War countless times. He had memorized every passage. He could quote the 13 chapters from beginning to end. Yet he came seeking deeper understanding. Sun Tzu listened to the young man recite his teachings perfectly. Then he asked a simple question. What do you see when you look at the mountain? The officer described the mountain's height, its strategic value, the paths that led to its summit, the positions that could be defended. Sun Tzu shook his head. "You see what I taught you to see," the master said. "Now look again. What else is there?" The officer studied the mountain again, but could only see more strategic considerations: forests that could hide troops, streams that could provide water, ridges that could shelter archers. Sun Tzu smiled sadly. "You have learned my teachings too well," he said. "You see only war. But the mountain is also beautiful. The sunrise paints its peaks with gold. Birds nest in its trees. Farmers tend fields in its valleys. A traveler might rest in its shade and write poetry about its grandeur." The officer was confused. What did beauty and poetry have to do with strategy? Sun Tzu explained his final lesson. "The greatest victory is to create a world where my teachings become unnecessary. I wrote of war because I lived in an age of war. I taught deception because survival required it. But the purpose of all strategy is to create conditions for peace. The supreme excellence is not to win battles, but to make battles unnecessary. This is why knowing when not to fight matters more than knowing how to fight. This is why subduing enemies without warfare represents the highest achievement. Every technique I taught serves this ultimate purpose. Use them wisely, and you create space for the beauty I can no longer see. Use them foolishly, and you perpetuate the very conflicts they were meant to end." The young officer left that meeting transformed. He had come seeking tactical knowledge and received philosophical wisdom. He understood at last that Sun Tzu's teachings were not merely about winning, but about creating conditions where winning and losing became irrelevant. The ultimate strategy was to transcend strategy itself. Whether this story is historical or legendary matters less than its truth. Sun Tzu devoted his life to understanding conflict. But his purpose was never to glorify it. He sought to minimize destruction, to achieve objectives efficiently, to preserve resources and relationships. His harsh methods served humane ends. His deceptions aimed at preventing greater violence. In our own age of perpetual conflict, economic competition, political division, personal struggle, this perspective offers hope. We need not be prisoners of adversarial thinking. We can seek outcomes that benefit all parties. We can build rather than destroy. We can create rather than compete. Sun Tzu would approve. The art of war endures because it speaks to something permanent in human experience, but it points beyond itself to something higher. Strategy serves purposes larger than victory. Conflict exists within contexts of potential cooperation. Every opponent is also a potential ally. Every enemy shares our common humanity. May you carry this complete teaching forward. May you master the techniques Sun Tzu offered. May you apply them wisely in your own circumstances. And may you always remember the purpose they serve, not victory for its own sake, not domination over others, but the creation of conditions where all may flourish. That is the true art of war. That is the wisdom of Sun Tzu. As the final words settle into silence, take a moment to reflect on what you have heard. The story of Sun Tzu is also your story. The challenges he faced mirror challenges you face in your own life. The wisdom he discovered through bitter experience is now available to you without that cost. You stand at a crossroads that every person encounters. Will you approach life's conflicts with reactive emotion or strategic clarity? Will you rush into battles that drain your resources or choose engagements wisely? Will you seek to destroy opponents or to achieve objectives while preserving possibilities for future cooperation? The answers to these questions shape not just individual outcomes, but the character of our shared world. Every person who learns to navigate conflict with wisdom reduces the total suffering. Every victory achieved without destruction creates space for something better. Every relationship preserved through skillful handling becomes a foundation for future collaboration. Sun Tzu lived in an age of constant warfare, yet he dreamed of peace. He mastered the arts of deception and violence, yet he valued honesty and harmony. He achieved legendary success on battlefields, yet he would have traded it all